This is how it happened. This is how the Batman died.
Considering Batman and Superman are the most iconic superheroes of all time, only challenged for those positions by Spider-Man, it's a bit surprising to look at the landscape of DC video games in 2025. What was once a genre reinvigorated by the heroes of DC now largely remains dominated by Marvel. In a mystery that we may need the world's greatest detective to solve, what the hell happened to Batman video games? For the younger players out there was once a time where licensed games based on movies, TV shows, or comic book characters had a 90% chance of just being terrible, rushed, or broken video games. Now, for the people my age who did grow up in the early 2000s, yeah, we were happy with most of the games we got, but they were still a mixed bag if they were based on our favorite cartoons. Sure, we would get the rare exceptions with games like Marvel Ultimate Alliance or the excellent LEGO games, including LEGO Batman. It wasn't until 2009 when Batman was at his modern-day peak of cultural relevancy, following the second entry of the Christopher Nolan Dark Knight trilogy, 2008's The Dark Knight, that the bar for licensed games was raised significantly. 2009's Batman Arkham Asylum took the licensed game trend from being something that had a W for every 100 or 200 flops to a core component of the modern AAA gaming industry. For many, the Arkham series would end up becoming a defining text for the Caped Crusader for countless reasons. From tone to storylines to promising that you would feel like Batman. Players of all ages and all levels of fandom for the Caped Crusader flocked to this PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 game. Hell, it was the first game that made me finally put down my Wii controller as a kid and scrounge up the funds to grab an Xbox 360 before quickly switching over to a PS3 like a month later. Like, come on, they had Uncharted and Infamous and even Joker exclusive levels in Asylum, can you blame me? One of the many reasons why Arkham Asylum worked as a licensed game beyond just being a quality title on its own merits was its choice to present to the world of DC via familiar yet evolved components. Most notably, the casting of the iconic late Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill in their defining roles of Batman and Joker. For many, myself included, we grew up with these actors being the voices that brought these characters to life, even bleeding onto the pages of comic books. While the game itself acts as a spiritual follow-up to Batman the Animated Series, for me, I knew this Batman from Justice League Unlimited. Out the gate, it felt like Rocksteady really understood why so many people love these characters and this world, and that was a very strong hook. And thankfully, that strong hook was backed up by a thrilling experience. Arkham Asylum isn't trying to retell a film, a TV episode, or a specific pre-existing storyline. Rocksteady creates a scenario that would best suit a video game. Batman is trapped on Arkham Island while the inmates run the asylum. He must rely on his capability as a detective, survivalist, and stealth expert to traverse the island, unlock its secrets, find new gadgets, ultimately to stop Joker. Mechanically, what you're doing physically as Batman suits video games so well because it is a 3D Metroidvania. You can't get much more video gamey than being a Metroidvania structurally, other than like going full Mario 3D platformer, and LEGO Batman kind of already had that covered. With one game that hit at the right time, Batman Arkham Asylum took the gaming community by storm and was standing proof that licensed video games could hang with the very best of the day, whether that was Uncharted 2 or BioShock. The game had sold about 2 million copies in its first 2 weeks on shelves, went on to receive several awards come 2009 Game of the Year season, and it would go on to launch what would become the Batman Arkham trilogy, depending on who you ask. 2 years later, in 2011, Batman returns for Batman Arkham City, a game with one of the most iconic lead-ins to launch that I have ever lived to see. From the size of the map, the threat of an antagonist in Hugo Strange that knew Batman was Bruce Wayne, the presentation of its black and white world and its marketing, to the fact that we now saw Batman dealing with inmates running a city Escape from New York style. Everything about Arkham City screamed big time sequel. Batman Arkham City added in meaningful and memorable side quests into the mix, featured one of the strongest conflicts Batman and Joker have had in the over 80-year history of these characters, plus it refined and arguably perfected the Arkham free-flow combat system. Batman Arkham City still stands as one of the best sequels in modern gaming history, and one of the strongest Batman stories in the character's modern canon. After the massive critical acclaim and sales success of the first game with an even bigger and more celebrated sequel, it was clear Warner Brothers had a winning formula on their hands. Surely we can only go up from here, no? Another 2 years pass, and you know what that means, time for another Batman game. But this time, Rocksteady wasn't behind the next installment of the Arkham saga. 2013 saw Batman Arkham Origins from WB Montreal released into the world on the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. Right next to the launch of the PS4 and Xbox One, it still makes no sense to me. There was also an actual 2D Metroidvania title released called Batman Arkham Origins Blackgate on the 3DS and PlayStation Vita that eventually made its way to PC. I'm really only mentioning that here, so a comment didn't do it for me. But the timing of the Batman Arkham Origins release is very unfortunate, not only because it led to die-hard Arkham fans like myself to miss the game since it couldn't be played on a PS4 and I had ditched my PS3 to afford the PS4, but this also gave the game a bit of an elusive mystique. At the time, reviews criticized the title for being a bit too similar and repetitive compared to Arkham City, even reusing part of the map from that game, which on paper shouldn't have been an issue for fans because if Arkham City was great, that's good news. But those that did play the game and felt it was a black sheep in the series have talked it up so much that today in 2025, a lot of people view this game as the sleeper best entry in the saga. Despite featuring a much weaker story compared to the previous two entries, retreading a lot of ground that was already covered well enough in Rocksteady's first two Batman titles. Oh, and we have another Batman vs. Joker story, following what may have been the best Batman vs. Joker story of the last 80 years. But Deathstroke. Now, Batman Arkham Origins is very worthy of standing alongside these other Arkham titles, as it shares much of its DNA with Asylum and City, but the release timing of this one, it didn't do many favors for people that were already growing a bit tired of the Batman Arkham formula. But speaking of the Batman Arkham formula, at this point, Warner Brothers realized they had a winning formula for video games, with bringing Batman into the world of gaming, and they could replicate it by taking that foundation that Arkham established with open worlds and free-flow combat to slap other Time Warner franchises onto it and lead to more money coming in. How about Lord of the Rings Arkham for 2014? Now, it may be a bit reductive to call Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor an Arkham clone, but it is absolutely inspired by it. It has its own quirks like the Nemesis system, but at its core, it feels like Arkham but Tolkien. The same can be said about 2015's Mad Max. The game has its own strengths, with its car combat working in the iconic filmic mythology of Mad Max, but at its foundational core, these games have enough Batman DNA in them that you could just call them Terry McGinnis. But 2015 is 2 years after Batman Arkham Origins, so you know what that means. Time for another Batman game. This time, Rocksteady was back, promising players they would finally be the Batman. Because what were we doing those other times, right? This time, the game earned a rated M for mature ESRB label and promised a new, dark, original villain from Rocksteady in the Arkham Knight, which many players felt was very much earned after the impact the team made for Batman with Asylum and City. In addition to its big brand new mature rating, Arkham Knight had something else the first two didn't. Controversies. It's worth remembering that in 2015, the industry was fresh off the trend of those one-time use codes for shoehorned multiplayer modes that would aim to prevent used game sales from taking away from new game sale revenue. But 2015 is also just a year before Overwatch brought loot boxes into gaming in a big way. So companies were still looking for any way to get players to spend more than the $60 asking price on their brand new games. Batman Arkham Knight's solution was a season pass that cost almost as much as the main game did at $39.99 US. Pre-release, all that was really confirmed was new skins, Batmobiles, new villains invading Gotham. But beyond these phrases, there was no clear insight into exactly what players would be paying for ahead of time. I know as far as microtransaction and monetary controversies go in gaming, this seems quaint in 2025, essentially an expansion or an expandalone worth of content, but pair this with two words that critics and players were repeating nonstop in 2015 and things got a bit more dire. Those two words: Batman fatigue. We're sick of Batman. God, please just keep the Joker out of this next one. Why does Warner Brothers only make Batman games? Is Rocksteady gonna at least make like a Superman game next? Can they do the Justice League? Because we don't want to move on from Batman kind of at the same time. I'm tired of Batman. Who wants all these Batman games? Can they really do a fourth Batman Arkham game? Well, clearly you didn't play Batman Arkham Origins if you're saying that. It may be hard to believe today, but this was everywhere you looked around the release of Batman Arkham Knight. I know the internet loves Batman Arkham Knight today. Between what it added, some may say needlessly, to the combat system to really make it very much a spectacle, the visual fidelity Rocksteady was able to achieve with Unreal Engine 3 that still gets brought up today in comparing to Unreal Engine 5 games, and the grittier tone. For a lot of players, in 2025, Arkham Knight is the Batman game. But in 2015, between growing tired of Batman tropes and the Joker across 4 games, Arkham Knight's ratcheting up the scale even further than Arkham City did with side quests and collectibles for going for completion, the Season Pass, the Batmobile, which is its own separate conversation, but ended up taking away more of what players loved, hand-to-hand boss fights, plus an incredibly predictable twist when it comes to that original character, the Arkham Knight. The overall sentiment after Arkham Knight released and everybody finished playing it was an exasperated finally from many players, even fans. And then nothing. The influence of Batman Arkham was still felt post Arkham Knight, again in that same year with Mad Max. Then we had a fun Arkham experiment from Rocksteady, which would hit in 2016 with Batman Arkham VR, and the foundation of the Arkham series was once again felt in 2017 with Middle-earth: Shadow of War. But everyone had the question of what's next for Rocksteady on their mind from 2015 onward. 2015 had marked 2 years after the release of Batman Arkham Origins from WB Montreal, so many players turned their attention to what they could be working on after Batman Arkham Knight released. And rumors were floating around of a Suicide Squad game that many players expected after the Suicide Squad was teased from the ending of Arkham Origins, but that went nowhere. And so did the rumors of their next Batman-focused game. In film, around this time, the DC Extended Universe was floundering, and there was no real identity or direction from WB in the gaming sphere. There were still some fun DC stories to play through thanks to NetherRealm with Injustice 2, and Telltale's take on the Caped Crusader across 2 seasons of their Batman, but other than that, the world of DC when it came to big AAA video games was largely kept alive by rumor after rumor after rumor. But finally, 2020 rolled around, and after countless showcases where insiders said Rocksteady's gonna be here, WB Montreal's gonna be here, the next Batman game is gonna be here, claims of a Batman title, a Batman Beyond title, or a Batman game starring Bruce's son Damian, the pandemic-born DC fandom had finally revealed Gotham Knights, a 1 or 2 player cooperative looter action RPG where Batman is dead, and players can play as a member of the Bat family. be it Tim Drake, Barbara Gordon, Jason Todd, or Dick Grayson, in efforts to take out the Court of Owls, a beloved faction from modern Batman comics. Despite some hesitation about the co-op looter elements that reminded many of the not-so-loved Marvel's Avengers, there was an interest among fans to finally see WB Montreal take their Arkham chops to something other than a quote-unquote Batman game, and give some love to the fan-favorite Bat family. Because even if Gotham Knights wasn't going to shake out, or wasn't exactly what people had been waiting for 5 years after the release of Arkham Knight, fans knew at the very least whatever DC project Rocksteady was on, that would be a normal single-player game they were hoping for. But at the same fandom, Rocksteady announced their next game 5 years after Arkham Knight, Suicide Squad: Kill the Justice League. Set in the Arkham universe, players would need to hunt down and execute the Justice League as some of DC's infamous villains. But seemingly, this was another game centralized on cooperative games as a service design, even more so than Gotham Knights in the end. Also, it would not release for 4 years after that trailer. Okay, not what players hoped for out of AAA DC video games, but this is the trend of the time. Battle passes, endless updates, stories that have no end, in theory, the perfect game. After all, people love Fortnite. But at the very least, a year later in 2021, it was revealed with a single brief cinematic that the team over at Monolith Productions behind the Middle-earth games, people liked those, they'd be taking their Nemesis system, the critically acclaimed Nemesis system, to the world of Wonder Woman for a new single-player adventure. That game also went radio silent and was canned earlier in 2025. So, what happened? In the 10 years since Arkham Knight, DC, in the world of video games, quite simply crashed and burned. Seemingly in large part thanks to a fairly constant wavering of interest in even making games from the top dogs at Warner Brothers. Gotham Knights eventually launched in 2022 to very middling reviews, performance issues, and a big sentiment was really just, why did they make a Batman game where we're not playing as Batman? Then the release of Hogwarts Legacy happened, which, believe it or not, was a game that also takes the foundation of Arkham's combat encounters and just gives players a wand to fit the IP skin they lay over it. And Warner Brothers' expectations for what a successful video game looks like had become, let's say, skewed with this title. That game did Zelda and Call of Duty numbers. Most games can never dream of doing that, which would make the eventual failures of the Suicide Squad game from Rocksteady look even worse for Warner Brothers and everybody involved. Between all of this and a pressure to chase trends to stay afloat, both Rocksteady and Warner Brothers Montreal, the teams with the keys to DC, decided to pursue these two video games. Sure, the Batman fatigue conversation may have added a bit to the motivation to shake things up in terms of who was starring in the next DC projects from these teams, but if anything is the source of this mishandling of Arkham's goodwill, it feels like it's Warner Brothers. They were struggling to have their film slate compete with Marvel, where they were once dominant in games over Marvel thanks to Rocksteady and WB Montreal. They ended up buckling to the might of Insomniac's Spider-Man, which, if you would believe it, does kind of share some DNA structurally with the Arkham series. In the time where DC was chasing trends and caving in on itself, Marvel games began to rise, in large part thanks to following the blueprint Rocksteady made with the Arkham Saga, proving that if a game was good, it didn't matter if it was a licensed game. The Spider-Man titles became the greatest superhero games ever made to many, dethroning the Arkham trilogy. Guardians of the Galaxy ended up being a very fun sleeper hit with a great story and a fun take on the team with solid shooting mechanics. And we even saw experiments like Marvel's Midnight Suns, Marvel Snap, and Marvel Rivals really connect with their respective audiences. Now in 2025, after fans have gone through 2 end-of-life, trend-chasing experiments with troubled development that some people did enjoy, to be fair, another VR Arkham title which was great for people that had VR, and the future of DC single-player games being cancelled with Wonder Woman, we have reached a point where almost everybody is just back to asking, Can we please just get another Batman Arkham game? While some may still be tired of Batman, it's hard to look at the last decade and say that another take on Batman in the gaming world would not be welcomed, even if it is divorced from the Arkham series canon. Well, for people who want that, it kind of feels like it might be safe to bank on this becoming a reality, as Warner Bros. Head executive David Zaslav has on several occasions reiterated the future of their gaming endeavors, and on paper, it should probably make fans happy if they stick with it. Moving forward, WB is locked in on 4 pillars when it comes to making games, those being, and I quote, Hogwarts Legacy, Mortal Kombat, Game of Thrones, and DC, in particular, Batman. End quote. A decade span of almost nothing, studios put in positions where they likely didn't want to be, shipping games that fans largely didn't enjoy, only to be met with a, you know what, make a follow-up to Arkham Knight in spirit, just do that again. That can only be described as frustrating for all parties. In an age where new video games take upwards of 5 or 6 years to develop, and Arkham Knight, a game that was made on Unreal Engine 3 that took just about 4 years to ship after Arkham City, still holds up as a beloved title for many fans. It's demoralizing to imagine what could have been if Rocksteady was allowed to build off what they did best, rather than trend-chasing game structure or villainous teams that Warner Bros. Was really trying to make a big deal in the 2010s. So if today's version of Rocksteady really does end up looking to their roots, what does that even look like in a few years' time? Because this is a very different Rocksteady today, when you consider the layoffs, talent departures, and shakeups that both Rocksteady and WB Montreal have had to face in the wake of these failures. Are we finally going to be banking on the Arkham nostalgia to do something like a Batman Beyond in the Arkham timeline? Does the recent massive success of James Gunn's DC reboot with Superman signal there's finally interest in a game about the Man of Tomorrow? Regardless of what happens, we have a ways to go before we see what's next out of the Caped Crusader and DC in AAA gaming. But in the meantime, how do you feel about the Batman Arkham Saga in 2025? Do you want to see the Arkham Saga continue? Would you rather a full reboot? Are you still holding out hope in general that Batman will return to games in a big way? Or has somebody else already taken the superhero licensed game crown in your eyes? Let us know what you think and what you hope to see next out of both Rocksteady and WB Montreal from the world of DC. For now, thanks so much for watching, and as always, you can stay tuned to Game Rant for more on Batman and the world of gaming.